Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining another one of our broadcasts, our videos here. So just a quick introduction from me to start off with. My name is Alice. I'm the founder of a charity called Ripple Suicide Prevention. Just to give a very brief overview around what that actually is. It's a charity that I set up in memory of my brother Josh, who I lost to suicide in November of 2020. Josh had been looking at harmful material on the internet and unfortunately ended up ending his own life. In response to that, I've set up Ripple, which is a piece of technology that can be downloaded as a browser extension or through Wi-Fi. It's available for schools, colleges, universities, parents, businesses to download. And it means that once downloaded, if somebody was to go on the internet and search for something harmful to do with self-harm or suicide, then the Ripple technology would intervene and instead signpost that person to mental health support services. So we've done a few of these now. We try to have guests that speak to us that are real, authentic, and understand the topic of mental health. And today I'm absolutely delighted and also a little bit overwhelmed actually to say that Dan is here with us. So Dan, without me stealing your thunder in any way, do you want to just give a quick introduction of yourself and what it is you do in your two different lifestyles that you lead?
Yeah, no, I appreciate Alice and I appreciate being asked. And I think, overwhelmed is probably a perceptual thing, isn't it? Because I'm quite similar with, all the work that you do and all of the stuff that I've seen. And I know we'll get into the reasons as to why I wanted to kind of be an ambassador and stuff. But I think, it's an amazing work, an amazing charity, amazing drive that you have, especially in the midst of it being such a kind of a tragic story, to then move it into something incredibly positive for other people, I think is beyond inspiring. So the overwhelmedness goes both ways, just so you know. But I think, yeah, for me, to sum it up, I suppose I compartmentalize into having like three different aspects of my life. The one I'm probably most known for is being in a professional metal band called Bury Tomorrow. We hail from the UK, but I've toured internationally now for many years. 7 albums later, I've just stepped off a flight from Australia, which sounds very grand, but it doesn't necessarily feel too grand from a jet lag perspective. But yeah, we've toured for lots and lots of years, and as I said, put out lots of albums, had lots of success doing so. So very, very lucky to be able to have done that for as long as I have. Since I was 16, actually, I've been in the band. My second career is I work for the NHS and have done since I was 18 years old. And so I've worked in the acute sector, the community and mental health sector. And now more recently, I work for the Integrated Care Board, which is those that kind of govern and support all of the local kind of Hampshire and Isle of Wight kind of constituency, both from a health and moving into a social care perspective as well. And so, yeah, so I'm the head of organisational development for there. Over kind of COVID time, just before COVID, I moved into staff facing rather than patient facing work. So for most of my career, I've been working in kind of operations management or access management and those kind of things for patients. And actually 2019, I moved into patient facing, which then into staff facing, which then morphed into well-being, equality, diversity and inclusion, organizational development, all of that kind of stuff. And then the third part of my life, which is what glues it all together, is my own lived experience through kind of mental health and crises, and my own journey with things like eating disorders, harmful material online that you can find through that space of things. I know we spoke about it last time, didn't we, about it not just necessarily being about suicide, but actually there are such harmful elements of the internet that I know I experienced when I was going through eating disorders and continue to kind of go through that. And then my own kind of mental health, so depression and GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder. And that being the glue, I kind of put a positive spin on it in a way that it's the thing that kind of is the running link between both of those sides. So campaigning for better understanding and awareness in mental health for our staff and our people equally helps me do that through my band on a global platform as well. So yeah, that's me in a bit of a nutshell, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and obviously you've touched on a few topics there that are, you know, quite tough. And as most of the conversations are around, you know, Ripple and the guests that we speak to regularly, it's going to be talking about the likes of suicide, mental health, and as you've mentioned, Dan, a couple of other bits there, eating disorders and so on, and how all of those things play into each other. So just a bit of a warning really before we go any further to anybody that might be watching this video, that there might be some sensitive things that we're speaking about, so just make sure that you take care of yourself. And also this video is going to be available for people to watch on Instagram and LinkedIn and on our stories as well if you wanted to go back and listen to anything. So I'm gonna kick it off, Dan, if I may. I've got lots of questions to ask you. I doubt very much I'm going to have time to ask all of them. But one of the things, I'm going to go a bit rogue here. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here. One of the things that I did want to ask you about, because I just thought it was such a brilliant idea, was in your role and your capacity as the lead singer of Bury Tomorrow, you've done quite a bit of work actually in terms of encouraging your fans and people who come to see you to open up about their mental health. Can you just describe a little bit more around what you've done previously there? Because I just think it's a brilliant way that you've actually managed to combine two hats into a concert, which people might not necessarily think is appropriate for mental health, but is so important.
Yeah, I thank you for asking about that as well. And I think it's not too rogue, and I'm glad to talk about it really. And so there's a number of ways, I suppose, the weaving of those worlds have come together. So the one that you're, I think, referencing is the safe spaces that I set up. So I had an idea a little while ago, and whilst I was going through my kind of crisis, well, I say crisis point, definitely, but the formal diagnoses of myself, because I wasn't diagnosed with mental health related issues or long-term conditions until I was about 27, 28. So it was quite late on in that. I was diagnosed with eating disorder prior to that, but definitely really understanding my own kind of generalized anxiety disorder, that was quite late on in life for me. And so I'd been in the band and I'd gone through all of this, blah, 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 long story long. But I realized that when you're in a position of influence and when you're in a position of mass influence, which we are, and it's not trying to big our band up, but I've got lots and lots of people that kind of talk to me about their own issues and link in with the music basis. I figured it's really easy for me to say, let's talk about mental health. You know, you will see that every awareness event, every advocacy event. And yes, absolutely, I completely agree with the messaging. And I thank people for providing that messaging of course, we should talk about mental health. But what I'd often find, and this is not trying to shame anybody for doing this, but it's just a reflection of my own self, is I'd put that out and then I'd kind of close my phone, or I'd go off and do the gig, or I'd go off and do something else. And really, how open is that door? It's like saying we've got an open door policy in an organization, right? What does that mean? You know, does it mean that the door is actually open? Do you step through that door? Do people perceptually feel that they're able to step in through that door? And all of the other stuff. And I felt like I wasn't really doing it justice. And so I figured that on tour, I had quite a lot of free time in between kind of arriving in a city and playing the show. And I felt that actually now is a really good opportunity for me to set up safe spaces. So I put out, it was just a random idea that I had. And I put out a message on my social media to kind of say to non-profits, to NHS organizations, to just friends, if anyone got locations that they might be able to host a safe space, essentially giving them the premise that it'd be a couple of hours of bringing people together to talk about their own kind of mental health, to talk about their kind of coping mechanisms, but equally to link them with local professionals. So what I also asked people to do was actually, are there any psychologists, any mental health practitioners, any people that work in the kind of charity sector in that space that would be willing also to come along and provide a little bit of signposting in those local areas? Because obviously I don't know the local context as well as those people would. And I immediately booked So of the kind of 7 dates that we did, I booked 7 straight away. So I think it was London, Glasgow, Manchester, Bristol, other places, Portsmouth. But we had like, I had an overwhelming response of people coming forward. I had some NHS trusts come and say, you can use our space. I had some non-profit kind of social enterprises, so like bakeries and stuff like that, which are really cool for us to kind of open to. My friend Sasha from Glasgow offered me her nail bar for the evening, which is a really safe space. It felt really cozy and awesome, so she offered me that. And then I had loads of professionals and people to kind of come and do a little slot on what the local context is. So it was very different each side. I had Metal for Good come for one, which I think was the Manchester or Nottingham one, which is great. They talked about the work that they do in that space. But it was awesome, you know, and then I could work out the amount of people that could come along. And the premise was that it was in the day. You didn't have to have a ticket to the show. You didn't pay money for it. It could be a friend, could be a family member. You can bring anybody along with you. They don't have to know Bury Tomorrow. They don't have to care about Bury Tomorrow. It makes no difference. Like, and they don't have to come to the show. They don't even have to like metal. It's just about an inclusive space that people can come and talk about what they want to talk about. And we had anywhere really as we did it. And I say we, as I did it. We had anywhere from like 10 people turn up to the biggest one was like 40 people, I think, turned up to it. And I talked about my story and I talked about my openness and vulnerability in the work that I do and being in a band and all of that kind of stuff, imposter syndrome, talked about anxiety, talked about depression and eating disorders. And then some of my coping mechanisms that I found worked for me. And then we kind of do a bit of a round table of like what works for other people. And what we found really quickly was that me just outright being open in that space, just kind of saying, here we go, this is me, this is my journey, just inspired people like which is, excuse the pun, like a ripple. It was like a ripple effect that happened around the room where you would, and you get this a lot, right? You get it a lot when you say, oh, has anyone got anything to add? And you're just waiting for the first person to put your hand up, and then everyone puts their hand up. And it felt like that massively. And we had lots of things happen, like some magic moments, like, or some really poignant moments where people say that they'd never been able to talk about their mental health in any way. They'd never been able to talk about suicide attempts in the past. We had people come out as gay for the first time. They'd never even said the words before. People had expressed that actually they feel that they might have been abused and they never could go anywhere, and they could then find local areas and places that they could go to really, because we always teamed up, we made sure that those people that were talking about that actually then had the right resources to walk away from there and it not feel like a closed door the minute they walk out of the door. And it was amazing. It was really hard and it was tiring, and it was and from an emotive point of view, it was quite I had to make sure I was in the right space to be able to do that.
It can be quite draining, right? If you're pouring your heart out and, you know, laying how you feel on the line a little bit, it can be very draining.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it was just it was well worth it. It gratified, you know, and it's not all, you know, selfless. I said this on the sessions themselves, this isn't all selfless. This is part of my own recovery. So I think for me, it's really important for people to know that, you know, that we're all going through this journey together.
Amazing. What an amazing idea to bring people together. And, you know, you've mentioned that you've had 40 turn up to some, you've had 10 turn up to another, but the reality is, Dan, that even one person turning up to those is enough and is amazing, to be honest with you. So a brilliant example, I think, of how you've really utilized your platform to help other people. So just amazing. I just wanted to get into that before we go any further, because I loved it. So tell us a little bit now then about your experience working in the NHS. You mentioned that you've been working there since you were 18. How do you think your experience working in the NHS has actually shaped your perspective on the likes of well-being and so on? Now, you know, you've mentioned before that you've got lived experience, you've got personal experience of this as well, but how has the NHS played a part in that?
I think it gives you naturally, so I'm not a clinician, but it gives you naturally a bit more clinical acumen, whilst I would never utilize that to give people advice
Yeah.
in that way, because it wouldn't be right for me to do so. It does give you a little bit more knowledge and awareness of the psychosomatic elements of, you know, mental health, physical health, combinations, long-term conditions, those kind of things. So I've worked for those departments. You know, I've worked for long-term conditions, chronic pain, places like that, where really that psychosocial, psychosomatic element of it is really part of that. So I think that's really influenced me from a personal perspective. I think understanding that from a public sector duty perspective, and our need to be more inclusive by statute, not by just it's a nice thing to do. This is absolutely a statutory requirement of public sectors that we pay due regard to the Public Sector Equality Act. And so I think that's also given me a lot of insight into what I feel that all industries should be thinking about. Well-being as well has been, whilst I would like to see it go up the agenda, it definitely did through COVID. So staff well-being, staff support went up massively throughout COVID. I want it to stay where it has been, if I'm honest, because it has started to take a little dip when it comes to financial profiling and stuff like that at the moment in time. But certainly through COVID, the psychological element was a big thing.
Well, one of the statistics that came out of COVID was about 1 in 10 NHS healthcare workers experienced suicidal thoughts during the first year of COVID. So, and I think, to be honest, it's not just, you know, in the NHS. I think actually it's in lots of different industries and organisations as well. But I do also see a bit of a dip in well-being on the agenda. It kind of was a sexy topic to talk about during COVID. And then as we're kind of coming out of that particular stage of the world, you know, people are starting perhaps to not think about it as much as they did before. What more do you think we can do to try and get it up the agenda and continue to really try to drive mental health to make sure it's a priority for everybody?
I think there's loads of things, Alice, to be honest. I think from a senior leadership perspective, we need more vulnerability when it comes to mental health. It's really important that people see representation from a progressive perspective as well. So not just from people in lower banded positions or lower positions, which is also really important, but equally seeing executives and senior leaders talk about their needs and their support needs, because it helps represent what that it is no direct reflection of ability and no reflection of progression, talking about your mental health. And that's what I haven't seen a lot of, if I'm honest. And that's the bit that shrinks away somewhat, I think, post-COVID. I think everybody over COVID kind of went, you know what do I need? I'm struggling. I need support. And actually, prior to that wasn't something that you'd see often. You'd see shining lights and examples of some people being like, I'm really open about that. But still, there is a lot of stigma when it comes to people being open and vulnerable in that way about their needs. And I think that's something that I really try as a senior leader in the NHS to kind of talk about, is that, you know, just because I'm aspirational, just because I'm in a senior position doesn't mean that I don't struggle. And equally vice versa, just because I have long-term conditions and mental health doesn't mean that I'm not good at my job. And I think what people struggle with is, especially in, you know, we see a lot about junior doctors, we see a lot about clinicians, and all the work that they have to go through to get to where they are in their career, and executives, high-flying executives, the pressure that's mounted on their shoulders is far more than just the pressure on themselves, if that makes sense. So they're holding the weight on their shoulders of all the patients, all the families, all the staff on their shoulders to then meet in a, let's be honest, don't want to make it overtly political, in a government or political landscape that isn't really rooting for the NHS. And equally coming out of COVID, we went from this huge swing of the NHS is the best thing in the world to overnight, seemingly, the NHS isn't meeting our waiting times and they're not good at what they do. And that's really difficult, because what that does is that challenges being. Most people join the NHS or social care or public sector in general because they want to do something bigger than themselves because they care. And actually, most of the people that join the NHS is because they've had family members there, they've been affected by the NHS in a positive or negative way. And actually, when you fracture that, when you attack that reason for being core value base, that's really, really difficult for people to deal with. And so I think more needs to be done about societal perception of the NHS, societal understanding of the NHS and the people that operate in it. And then I think more needs to be done when it comes to really supporting people to be open and honest about the mental health needs that they have in the workplace without any fear of detriment or reflection on their career pathway, put it that way.
Yeah, completely agree. Completely agree with all of that. And as you said, it's that vulnerability, isn't it? I think, and being brave enough actually to say that it's not all good, and actually this is how you're feeling, and this is what you need. So just on that note, and I think you've got a similar question for me in a moment as well. When you're finding things difficult and tough, I mean, you've just mentioned to me before we hit record as well that you've just been to Australia and the jet lag is real, right? So sleep problems and so on is all contributory factors to how you feel in yourself and so on. But what do you do to help yourself if you're finding things tough?
Yeah, I suppose the first thing is recognizing there will be times that you find tough. And I think that's a really hard thing to do. I think people expect that, people don't realize that a lot of mental health related kind of issues are not fleeting. They are a long-term condition. This is something I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life. And as scary as that is, it's also quite freeing to know that it is a journey, and you can kind of accept that that's part and par of the makeup that I have in my brain, whether that's through experiences and trauma in the past, or whether that's because of a chemical imbalance. It is what it is. It's something that I'm going to have to deal with. So I think that acceptance is something that most people are kind of striving for and going with. And I think, even on this tour, I've been really open. I put up a post today actually about it. And I cried 3 times on this tour, like tiredness, worry, anxiety, and sleep does crazy things to our body when it comes to mental health and physical health. Positive and negatively. And I really experienced a lot of that. I had a panic attack before one of the shows and after one of the shows. And none of that, that doesn't happen often with my band. It's not something that I face with imposter syndrome at all. I know what I'm doing. I've done this for a long time, world's longest apprenticeship. But I think there's that. I think as well as my support networks are super important. The tour family that I have on tour is really, really important to me. They are my family. They look after me. They support me, and I can be open with them and say I'm having a bad time. And before one of the shows that we played, I said to everyone, I'm feeling really bad mentally right now. And that's probably one of the first times I've managed to get there with everybody. And my brother's in the band as well, so that's a bit easier. But and everyone was with me. Everyone was supporting me. Everyone said, you just got to do what you need to do. And both big me up and say, you can do this. But equally on the other flip side of say, if you need something, you let us know, which I think support networks are so important. And they're so important to develop pre-crisis or pre any kind of things. Develop them in life when you're good. Develop in your life when you're striving you're thriving, because when you need them most, it's very difficult to go, I need to now rely on my support network. The other aspect of that I've utilized is mindfulness, understanding mindfulness. I don't do it as much as I should now when formal meditation and stuff like that, but understanding the concept and learning about mindfulness has really helped me because it kind of puts things into perspective from a present perspective, not from a past or future worry or regret, that kind of stuff. So that's helped me.
Okay. So is that an app, Dan, then, is it that you use, or do you do kind of classes? How do you?
So it used to. So it used to be. I used to use things like Headspace and stuff a lot, which I found very useful as an app basis, which kind of got me into understanding mindfulness. But mindfulness is such a big concept, and I think the preconception people have is mindfulness is just doing meditation. It's not at all. Mindfulness is the concept of being present, whether that's a thought, a moment, an activity, whatever. It's about being present. And the minute I got that, it kind of unlocked a whole load of things for me. So how do I conceptually put myself in the present? How could I use something like meditation to do that as a tool? Equally, how could I use an activity that I'm doing to be present with? So whether that's might be some exercise, that might be the show that I'm doing, it might be a moment. So for example, when I was really struggling in Australia, I went for a walk. And I tend to do this in every city, that just so I can see it. But I went for a walk and I just sat on my own and I just contemplated the here and now. Like, I'm in Australia, and I do this in Manchester, I do this in Portsmouth, I'll do this
Yeah.
wherever. I am here right now, and the world is running around me, and it's all frantic and it's all crazy, much like how my background looks like now. It's all crazy and it's all moving, but I'm here, and I can choose to
Yeah.
be here. And I think that is a real powerful moment. You can do it when you're like eating and stuff. You can do it with everything, because I tend to go back to like when I've walked my dog in the past. I walked my dog and it's been raining a little bit, and what I'll conceptualize, or I'll start to like think about heavily, is the feeling of rain on my skin, the looking at my dog and thinking, does my dog have the same anxieties that I do? No, probably not. Like, I'll think about how beautiful it is that my dog can experience the world in a different way. Like those kind of things, that's mindfulness. People can use meditation in a similar way. So things like body scans, quite difficult for people that have got eating disorders. I found them useful, but I know for other people, they find it quite hard because it pinpoints aspects of the body. You can do things from a meditation point of view, like situational meditation, or kind of the imagination part of meditation. So imagine a feather, imagine a beach, all of those, which is the more traditional side of it. I think most people have heard of. It's quite hard. Takes a lot of dedication. It's almost like working out, but it's working out for the brain. And the other side of things that I don't want to shy away from is talking about medication. So I've talked that I've been medicated for mental health. Whilst I don't think it necessarily solves the issue, I think you need to do it in combination with other stuff. I do believe in medication for people that need it, if you need that. So I'd never shy away from telling people that I take medication for my mental health. I think it's an important thing for people to be open about. And it's no negative reflection. It's just what works for you or what doesn't work for you. And I think there's still a lot of stigma around medication for mental health anyway, that people feel almost less than by taking it. And it,
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm quite open with that as well. And I'm with you. I'm in the medication boat with you. So yeah, when my brother passed away, I went on medication for my mental health, and I haven't come off them. Simple as that, really, because I don't feel like I'm in a position at this moment in time in order to safely do that. So yeah, I think in combination with other things, it's not doesn't fix anything, but it certainly does help. It helps me. And it sounds like it helps you as well. So yeah, I think it's important to be open and honest about it, definitely.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I mentioned, I think it was to a colleague a couple of days ago as well, was I got asked the other day, what do you do to kind of look after yourself? And other people on the panel that I was on at the time when I was initially asked that question they sounded all like super women, to be honest. Ice baths, 10-mile runs, just doing amazing things that they could easily just get up and doing all of the garden, and I just said, if I'm honest with you, if the days that I'm struggling, that I open my eyes, I can't even get out of bed, let alone do a 10-mile run or go into an ice bath or landscape my garden. I can barely get the duvet off of me. So my way of coping, if I'm having a really bad day, if I can, is to put on a feel-good film, order a pizza, stay in bed, and ride it out, really, until the next day, when I wake up, usually the next day, and I'm feeling a little bit better. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that everybody's different, and we've all got different ways in which we cope with things and get over things and make sure that we're feeling better about ourselves and about what's going on. So if running isn't for you, if walking isn't for you, and so on, then there's always the bed and the pizza, I think.
I couldn't agree more with you, Alice. Yeah, I think we over-aggrandize sometimes, and I think, and by no means am I saying that that's what other people on the panel are, because I'm sure that absolutely does work for them, and those things are absolutely clinically, recognized as stuff that helps. But I think you're right, and I think it's also about gratitude and understanding success, right? And if getting out of bed for you, if having a shower for you is something that you couldn't do when you're feeling really low, or something that you find very, very difficult, it's about understanding that actually, well done, you got out of bed, well done, you went to work, well done, well done, you recognized that you might not have needed to go to work today because that's not the right productive thing, well done for having the conversation, well done for sitting and doing some me time. Like that's the bit that I think people always think like it's, and this is what I meant when I said about long-term conditions and understanding that this is a journey, is that it would have been very easy for me on this last Australian tour to say, well, you've given advice to people. I've been keynote speakers about mental health. I've provided programs on psychological safety for people, in the NHS. I've talked openly and honestly about how people should be open and vulnerable about, I've done quite a lot in the mental health space now. And it would be really easy for me going, what a fraud you are, Dan. Like, what a fraud you are that you're freaking out before a show, and it's nothing to do with the show, it's to do with my own mental health, my own mental well-being. What a fraud you are, Dan, for doing that. But actually what I did was I sat back a couple of days later and certainly reflect on it now and go, well done for you for seeing that at that moment you needed other people, at that moment you needed to reflect and to have a cry, to have a moment where you just let it all go. Like, and you know what, like, I think there's so much bravado in the world. There's so much, like, let's not add to it. Let's recognize that the world is a really big, scary place for a lot of people. And we all go through a lot of stuff, and we've all got mental health. Everyone's got a brain. So everyone's got mental health, related needs. But I just think if we can really be open about it, if we can really say and talk about it in an open way, the world's going to be a much safer place, because we'll all know there's a bit more about everybody,
100%. And for you to say that, Dan, with your platform and the number of people that intently watch you every day and follow you on social media and so on, I think it gives hope to everybody that if you can do it, anybody and everybody can. So it's refreshing, actually, how vulnerable you can be about you, and just even working in the mental health sector. I know I personally have, I always say, try and practice what I preach and so on. I'm trying to support others with their mental health, but some days there's days that I need to prioritize my own as well. And there's no shame in that. So I've grilled you for long enough. Have you got any questions, Dan, that you've got for me at all?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I definitely do. And I think some of it's similar, and you've already made reference to one, which is great. I suppose it's a difficult one. It's a hard question, I think, which is around, coming off the back of the reasons as to why, you've set up Ripple, which you've articulated beautifully at the start of this. How do you maintain that drive? How do you maintain that, and is it based on, the memory of your brother, is it based on something else that now is almost taken over that kind of drive? Like, what is it that keeps you going in such a difficult space,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's changed over time, if I'm honest. I think initially I came up with the idea of Ripple on Christmas Day of 2020. So that was exactly a month after we lost Josh. So when lots of other people were sat, I'm sure, enjoying their Christmas dinners with their families and so on, I was sat at my parents' house on their sofa, just thinking about Josh and what stuff he was looking at on the internet. And I just couldn't believe there was nothing there to intervene and intercept people who were looking at harmful stuff. And I came up with this idea. And from that moment onwards, it was a way for me to grieve, basically, and to put my energy in such a dark time into something positive in any way. I had absolutely no idea or expectations at that stage, if I'm honest with you, that I'd, go on to have a small team working at the charity and becoming a registered charity even, and being around the world, available to download around the world, and intercepting thousands of people's searches. It just wasn't on my agenda. At the beginning, it was very much an opportunity or a way for me to put this absolutely horrific energy that I had into something positive. I think as we've progressed and moved through the grief journey, not that I'm through it in any way, shape or form, it's still very much something that I battle with on a daily basis. I now have a purpose every day to get up and try to stop other families from feeling how mine feel. Basically, if I can stop just one family feeling how I feel, how my mum feels, how my dad feels every day, then that's enough for me. And that is what drives me every day to get up and keep going. Because I think if I didn't have that, total honesty here, I would struggle to get up. I really would. So yeah, I would say that's probably my answer. It's changed. It's an ongoing journey with it.
And do you think that's kind of, whilst it doesn't take away necessarily the pain, do you think there's that catharsis in going through that, to, the more and more you realize the impact, which is obviously very hard, I think, you can measure the impact obviously as part of the business, and how you're kind of growing it, and how you're affecting, positively the lives of others, but really understanding the gravity of the impact that you're having is quite difficult, isn't it? Because you never know. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
As a KPI for your charity, it's very difficult to necessarily measure really how far and deep that goes.
Yeah.
You can look at searches, you can look at interceptions, you can look at that, but actually the positivity that you're having is far beyond the worlds of how many searches that you've kind of intercepted, how many companies you work with. But as you go through that, do you feel there's a bit of catharsis in that space? Do you feel there's a bit more of the grieving process that is solved as you go through that, and as you are seeing that impact based on, Josh's memory?
Yeah, I think so. Don't get me wrong, there are some days that I wake up where, I might have a couple of meetings about Ripple in my lunch hour in between my day job, or before I start my day job, or after my day job. And I actually think, do you know what? I don't think I can talk about Josh today. I just don't think I'm strong enough to actually talk about my why today. And on the whole, people are really understanding with that. But when I do talk about Josh, which I do every single day, and why I've set up Ripple and the difference it's having, it does help me. It keeps Josh's memory alive. It keeps him very much alive in my memory. And, as you say, I might not be able to tell, unfortunately, how many people this has actually helped, but it's just had under 20,000 interceptions of harmful searches. So that's huge numbers of people that have searched for something really harmful on the internet and have been redirected to support services. And it's really far reaching, actually, with the people that speak to me and say, what, Ripple's helped me. I had one recently, which is completely different to the emails or messages on social media that we get saying that Ripple's helped them. I had a lady the other day that turned up on my doorstep at my house. She was buying an item of clothing that I put on Facebook Marketplace for £5. She was at my front door wanting to collect it. And I opened the door and she recognized me and just started crying on my doorstep, saying that Ripple saved her life last summer. And, you know, that came from me selling a jumper on Facebook Marketplace that, you know, I would never have known that. Had she not had the courage to say that to me, I'd have never have known that. So I obviously just cried straight away as well. But it's those moments, it's those messages that we get, it's those moments where people actually say that Ripple's helped them, that drive me to continue and grow the team and get the software out to as many people as I possibly can.
It's an unreal achievement as well. Like, it's not, you know, and that one moment, as you said to me, one moment, one interaction, one interception, that's enough, right? And, you know, and when I saw on that Christmas day when you were sat there coming up with it, it was almost singular in its nature of like, I just want to stop someone else. And, you know, you almost framed it in that mind, someone else. And now you're talking about 20,000
it's just unbelievable.
20,000 interactions like that. That's another level. And, you know, to a point where people are recognizing you and Josh, you know, from the stories and the memories. I think it's just, you know, that's what inspired me. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, like this is a different level, because it equally combines two things. It combines the memory, the message, the theory, the ethics, all of that kind of like more holistic side of it with tech, which is often like overlooked, right? With a lot of this stuff, often, you know, especially with kind of charity side of things as well, it's really difficult for people to kind of get this stuff off the ground, even, you know, from an idea. So I think your knowledge of tech is an incredible link there between actually this stuff can happen from a, I always say, like, so I'll go back to myself, it's not necessarily a question, but like I talk about operationalizing the non-operational. So something like equality, diversity and inclusion, well-being, mental health, like my job is to operationalize that and make that, you know, policy, procedure, practice, infrastructure. And you've done that by proxy of going, I've developed tech that essentially can do that, which is operationalizing the non-operational, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I will say that it was kind of just my idea, sadly, from the lived experience, but there's an amazing team behind Ripple that have made it happen. So, you know, I'm very lucky to have had good people, good support network around me, like you were saying earlier. Finish off, Dan, I've got a quick question for you, which is, if somebody is struggling themselves, finding things really tough, really difficult, are there any specific resources that maybe you've used before or that you can recommend that people would do or utilize after this?
Yeah, I think there's quite a few. I would say, as much as people can avoid those long steps or those barriers for reaching out to mental health services, you know, there's lots of media perception of waiting times and lots of reality on waiting times, of course there is. But nothing can beat having a discussion with a mental health professional, whether it's your GP, whether it's IAP services, whether it's, you know, clinical psychologists or stuff like that. Nothing can beat having that conversation with somebody that really understands the science behind what's going on, because I found that very useful for me. But I also know, before you get to the waiting list and the waiting times, there's still a lot of barriers and stigma for people to even go to their GP and try and talk to them about that. And there's also a lot of kind of media messaging about how long things are. So it will put people off even trying, which is a real big, I think that's one of the biggest shames at the moment, is that, yes, there are long waiting times. Yes, there are GP waiting times, but there's still access there. You can still try to get that access. And I think a lot of the stuff at the moment is putting people off that. So I think that's one. I think there's lots of stuff on the internet, I think, and to kind of caveat this whole conversation, I would say search for the things that can positively impact you. So for me, like, and I know that's hard a lot of the time because, and hence why Ripple was born, but like, I think for me, understanding things like mindfulness, understanding things like meditation, understanding things that will positively impact your life is really, really important, and make it your hobby. You know, understand that other people go through this. Everybody goes through something, and everyone will need support in a way. Some people just need it a little bit more acutely than others. And so I think for me, especially for anxiety and low mood, that I found that very, very helpful. And then, as I said before, the other main thing is just building that support network wherever you can. And it's not easy. It's not doesn't just happen like that. You know, it's practicing and working and trusting and getting people to a place where you can hold them in, that you can hold people up in that due regard of like,
Yeah.
I trust them with this information. I mean, sometimes that won't work. Sometimes that will be, you know, you'll fall at that point. But it's about getting up and working through that again and again and again. So you build that really good infrastructure around you. But yeah, and again, the easiest thing to say is talk about it, isn't it? It's the easiest thing that I could say in the world, but there's lots of options for people to talk now. There's more options, there's more charities, there's more people like yourself that are driving this stuff forward. So even if it is through that Ripple initially stopped that side of things and offered, you know, as I know you do, you know, offer the signposting and the positive kind of readdress, access them, try it. What's the worst that's going to happen if you try
Exactly.
to go to a charity, or try to go to IAPT, or try to go to, you know, your local kind of community kind of initiatives and stuff? What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, the worst that's going to happen is you don't quite get on with it. You know, the best thing that's going to happen, it will change your life for the better and continue your life onwards, you know. And I think that's a really important thing to remember. Like, and I would implore all the guys out there as well, not that it is all, but we know the statistics, don't we, about and the bravado that runs along with being a man. I would say to all my fellow men listening, please don't operate in that bravado. It doesn't make you any less of a man or whatever to not reach out and not talk about your needs and cry and not be upset about stuff. Like, it is what it is. Take it from me. But then to everyone, like, it doesn't make you any less of a human being. It just makes you a human being in general. So I think just talk and connect and be better together, you know.
Oh, perfect way to finish, I think, Dan. Thank you so much, not just for actually spending time, you know, in your evening to have this conversation with me, but also actually for being so open and honest and vulnerable about the reality of mental health. Really appreciate it. And it's so nice to be able to connect with people who get it, who understand it, and who can use their platform to help others. So thank you so much for joining. Dan is a Ripple ambassador. Merch on its way, Dan, hopefully, by the way. So you'll be seeing a bit more of Dan and how he can help Ripple and spread awareness of positive mental health going forward. Thank you so much to everybody who's watched this today. Really appreciate it. I know it's not an easy topic. It's hard to discuss. It's hard to talk about, but it's such an important topic to be speaking about, and it needs to be spoken about. Do remember that, as well as all of the amazing resources there that Dan has mentioned, there are other services that are available to help you as well. A couple of them include the likes of Samaritans, Shout, Calm, and also NHS 111 as well. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you again, Dan. And we'll see you next time. Thanks all.